Because normally on Teams, there's a separate button, and I'm not a huge screen sharer.
When you go to share screen, there should be a little pop-up that says share sound.
Okay, I hope that's the case.
So you may have to unshare first and then check.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, yep. Can share sound. Thank you so much. Okay. It should help that I'm with a bunch of coaches, so you can coach me through this. Okay. All right. So as I said, this is about embracing the awkward, working through difficult conversations. We usually share this with our resident assistants and other student groups on campus. So I thought this would be helpful, both for you to see what we show other students and people on campus, and for yourselves to get an idea. So is everyone able to see this okay? And I'll get started. Or should I move this? There we go. Okay, here we go.
Looks great.
All right. Of course, it's not working. I apologize. There we go. All right. So maintaining mental health during the coronavirus. We all know that people have different experiences of this whole coronavirus pandemic. So you may not have the same feelings as everybody else, and that's okay because everyone reacts differently. Some people are really okay with being solitary, and others are much more social. So this has been quite a stressor for people who are a little bit more gregarious and used to socializing. And it's becoming a stressor for those of us who are maybe more introverted as well. So connecting with friends and family is a great thing to do. And even if that's virtual or like we're doing today, it's nice to see people's faces and be able to socialize, even if we're doing it virtually. So it's just important to validate that. You don't have to be there to be there. You have to find creative ways to stay connected. And I've got a huge list of some creative ways. There's so much now out there. PBS has put out databases. People have put out all kinds of things as far as doing virtual activities. So you can schedule virtual dinners and dance parties. You can do creative work together virtually, knitting circles. I've seen people doing, collaging, art therapy, pet therapy. Everything's turned on to virtual now. So enroll in a remote learning class, go to a museum tour, try home workouts together. So these are kind of some of the things you can recommend to students if you're looking for ways to socialize without physically being with each other. And we like to say, rather than social distance, we like to say physical distance, because we do want people to really understand that you can still be social. It's not the same, but it doesn't have to be like you're not social. It just means physically you can't be where you used to be with each other. There's all kinds of, Netflix movie watching you can do together. People have Netflix watch parties. So things like that, we encourage students to take advantage of. And now people are getting pretty good at this. When we were first doing this, maybe in April, it was all pretty new. And now, this is almost second nature for people. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the signs that you might see. And I know that was one of the questions that came up. What are the signs? So people, that very well, you may know their baseline, kind of how people are on a day-to-day basis. And we're always looking for deviations from that. So some significant visible change. So these signs that I've got up here, you can just take a look at them. But really, when it's not acting like themselves or more irritable, talking about feeling hopeless, maybe you notice somebody is intoxicated, maybe you notice somebody looks disheveled, and we're not necessarily talking like one day or a couple of days of this, but when you see patterns of behavior, we like to say 2 weeks or more, but certainly it depends on the person, the student, the individual. And so if you know someone to be very quiet and suddenly they're loud and having outbursts, that could be a warning sign. If a person's normally loud and having outbursts, maybe that's not a warning sign. Maybe quiet and reserved is more of a warning sign. But so here's some signs. You can just, look down the list. So I don't know if this is in the way. Can you see that it says how to have the conversation?
Yes, that's what you're seeing is not what we see.
Okay, great.
I did the same thing in a recent.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Tina. So keep it casual and relaxed. And again, this slideshow was built for students. So think of it as a chill chat, not a therapy session. It doesn't have to get a serious tone. You don't need to feel like you're, even though you're virtual, you might not be, sitting beside the person as you are when you're in physical space, but you can still convey presence through the screen. And so you want to, not necessarily be staring at a person or feeling like you're intensely gazing, but keep it casual, listen, let that person take the lead. Try not to offer advice or try to fix the problem. A lot of times we rush in too quickly with that. And let everyone know, it's okay that you're feeling like this. Even if you don't personally understand it or haven't personally had that experience, I think it is very important to just validate to a person that, it's okay. Whatever you feel, it's okay to not feel okay. Then you want to be able to make yourself available. So be a person they can rely on. This doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries or that you allow someone to, text you 7, 8 o'clock at night or interrupt your meal time or wake you from sleep. But let them know and communicate that effectively early on, kind of the boundaries of your relationship. Ask open-ended questions. And this means you don't want just a yes or no question answer. So that you can say, tell me about what it was like when you tried to talk to your professor, rather than say, did you talk to your professor? And then letting a person open up at their own speed. Some people are very forthcoming right away and you're getting a little too much information, and that can feel like a therapy session. And other people, that they need time. So having a very important conversation about mental health isn't going to really be comfortable for many people. So let them know that, it's okay if you don't feel like telling me right now, just know that I'm here when you're ready. You don't also want to demand answers. So if you're asking somebody, for example, do you have a therapist? That can feel like a very invasive question. It can imply that you think maybe they need a therapist. And depending on the individual, that may feel like a judgment. So there's a nice way to be able to say, some people who are experiencing what you're feeling might want to talk to a therapist. Maybe you're interested in that. There are gentle ways to broach some of these subjects. But again, try not to be demanding. When you're trying to encourage someone to talk to an expert, I know that can be hard to do, but I think many times medical health is not as, physical, going to a physician is not as stigmatized as going to a mental health expert. So it can help to tell somebody, look, if you were having trouble seeing, you might go to the eye doctor and then you might need glasses. Maybe the person already wears glasses, so you can use that as a nice parallel. It helps you see better. Well, maybe talking to someone can help clear your thinking up a little bit, or can help you figure out your motivation. So you can encourage someone to talk to an expert and let them know that, these are all the other experts you might have no problem talking with. So maybe it would make sense for you to talk to a mental health expert. And then let them know you're not judging them. It's not going to change how you feel about them. And then remember that things can be medical. So even if it seems like a person is depressed and it's a mental health issue, these things can be thyroid issues. It could be something about blood sugar. It could be a whole host of things that we don't know unless we're medical doctors. So let the person know they can see their primary care doctor and just have a chat. Many primary care doctors now are screening for behavioral health. So that's another gateway into perhaps getting some counseling, especially if it's a pediatrician that this person's seen, known since infancy, that many students are seeing their pediatricians, into their 22nd year. So the doctor is always a good avenue. I'm going to show this video, and this is where I hope my sound works. It's called Seize the Awkward. It's part of an ad council campaign, and you can look it up on YouTube, but they have wonderful, wonderful things. So here you go.
Awkward. Do I look familiar? I should. You might remember me from here. Here. Or maybe even here.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
It can actually be a perfect moment to reach out to a friend and ask if they're okay if they seem down.
It doesn't matter how you say it.
You all right?
Everything's okay?
All G?
You all right, girl?
You cool? You bugging dog.
Just show you're there for them. Go on, Kelly. Seize the awkward.
Hey, you haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org. How to know if you should reach out to a friend. Your friend might be.
All right, now I gotta stop this. All right, so cute video, right? And I think that just kind of speaks volumes to people, because that's exactly how it can feel. But it is really about taking that first step. And that can even be in coaching or in our professional lives or with peers or family members. And there are ways to say this that's not really putting anyone on the spot, acknowledging that this might be awkward, and really just putting it out there. So here are some examples, and this is what you saw in the video. Seems like you haven't been yourself lately. What's up? That's not, that's kind of a nice observation. And most people would feel like, oh, this person cares. How are you? We haven't talked in a while. It looks like you've been down. What's going on? So notice how there's a statement and then there's a question. And that's kind of going to become more natural and more easily accomplished the more you do it. So just like anything else, you do it the first time, it may be really awkward, but if you keep trying it, it starts to feel natural. So here's some more conversation starters. So if someone's not showing up for their coaching appointment, hey, where have you been? I missed you a couple of times. It lets the person know you've been thinking about them and that you are meaningful in their lives. And then, of course, whenever you're ready to talk, I'm here to listen. That lets the person know, you don't have to hurry up and talk right now. I'm here, and that conveys that presence. Again, there's just a couple more examples. I haven't heard you laugh in a while. Is everything okay? I think that's a nice one. All right. And then after the conversation, we just want to know, we don't want to give up. It's not kind of a one and done thing. Keep the invitations coming. So you want to keep offering. Just because a person turns you down once doesn't mean you shouldn't, ask again. Handle their trust with care. So this means, it's not like you're confidential, but there is privacy and there are some concerns. So anytime a person tells you certain kinds of things, like I'm thinking of killing myself, or you hear about risky behavior, and this also depends on the protocols within your departments or within, where you're coming from, but you do want to let them know that you're not going to go, talking to everybody, talking to their peers, just talking in the hallway about it, or sharing their personal information. But you never want to promise confidentiality unless that's, part of the nature of your work with a person. So if you're a counselor or a physician or, an attorney or someone where there's client confidentiality. And then get some outside help. Don't do it on your own. That also means talk with your peers and your colleagues and make sure that you're you don't have to talk about the details, but you can let them know you're going through something, and then know the chains of reporting within your agency or wherever you work. All right. So that is that. That's really brief. It's not a lot about what we do on our campus, but I thought this is a little bit about what you guys might be finding yourselves doing. And then I can just let you know that counseling services, we're open 8:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. And our website has all of the information as far as the phone number, but it's I can put it in the chat. Students can call there after hours, and there's a press 2 for an emergency clinician that a person can talk to. So any enrolled student at Bridgewater is able to use the on-call service after hours. It's not for emergencies, but sometimes people just want to talk. And if it becomes an emergency, the on-call person knows how to get help in our community resources. So that's what's available there. And we also have, if you go into it and if you navigate into our Bridgewater website, you'll see that there are 2 new things we're offering. One is called Together All, and that's a peer-to-peer online virtual network where students can chat with other people. It's global. You're anonymous. It's not anonymous on the back end, so that if somebody needs help, they they get help, but it's, you use a handle so that no one knows your actual name. And then there's also a WellTrack app that's also open to Bridgewater students for free. And that's a kind of a suite of mental health tools with cognitive behavior therapy. They have meditations, they have mood tracking. So those are some of the things we offer through counseling services. And so I don't know how much time we have, but I would, not very much. So I'd like to be able to answer any questions if people have them, and Jill too can hop in.
We have a good 5 to even almost 10 minutes for questions, discussion. So I really want to encourage discussion here. So please use the chat box if you find it easier to just put a question there, or just unmute yourself. It's a small enough group. We can go ahead and do that.
I don't have a question per se, but I have a comment. The boundaries component of it is so important. I know that I've had friends who just kind of put their mental health on me, and you have to make sure you're taking care of your mental health as well, because you're not a professional. You can refer them to professionals. You can help them that way, and it's just so important to take care of yourself as well as them. So yeah, I thought that was a really important part and good to highlight during the video and the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Emmett. I think that's a perfect summation. I often do hear from students who work with other students that they have a difficult time. We all do. So it's not, just about a person's age or experience, but difficult time knowing when you have the friendship hat on, sort of, and the professional hat, and we all wear these different hats. But ultimately, you're right, you have to take care of yourself. And I think the best way to do that is in the beginning to start to let a person know what's okay with you within the boundaries of your relationship, and what's not okay. And so that there are no surprises, so that as soon as things, and pay attention to your inner voice. And so if it starts to feel like a little too much, you can say, hey, remember last week when we were talking, I think the kinds of things we were talking about, I'd rather have you talk with someone else about those things. I appreciate what you're saying, and I don't think I'm the best one to help you. So why don't I help you find someone? So it's not as though you're like, that's it, I'm out of here. But you're still helping. You're just not being that person who's hearing all of this all the time.
I'm going to piggyback off what Emmett said a little bit. We don't want the ed coaches to feel like they have to step in that role at all as like therapist. So that's really important. Like, Donna mentioned earlier, just not trying to be the problem solver, not trying to offer advice, but rather like finding resources where they can get help. We just, want you guys to have like for students that aren't yet at the point who might need professional help, more so are just struggling maybe a little bit. So that was the idea behind this. And I love the language that the examples you gave, Donna, the language to use. I think that's really important, just to come across non-accusatory or, anything like that. So that language was really helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
What was the name of that app that you'd mentioned?
There's an app called WellTrack, and if you navigate to it's WELLTRACK, and it's available on the App Store and Google Play for Android and Apple products. But if you go through the external wellness website, there's a place to register, and students need only register with their Bridgewater student email. And so it's free for all students. It's not for faculty and staff or alums at this point, but for students. And it's wonderful. It has mood tracking and cognitive behavioral skill kind of ways to help a person to think about the thoughts they're having and how their thoughts may impact their behaviors and their feelings.
And I found some students are really into it, and then others are like, oh, I tried it, it didn't work. And I mean, one of the things that I tell people is that something might work for you at one time that doesn't work for you another time. And so that's why it's great to have a whole toolbox of things, because, you know, there might be one time that the breathing is something that's helpful for people to just relax a little bit versus, all right, well, let me just track my mood. Oh, wait a minute, my mood was the same this way last week. What is it that's going on at the same time period, so that you can kind of see a pattern of what's happening and say, okay, what is it that I need to do to try to shift this pattern? So that's one of the things that I find useful to let, when I talk with students about just really, you know, what may work this time might not work the next time, and vice versa.
I know in my experience, sometimes, and this is something that was said in the video, it's not necessarily even about trying to give someone a solution or help for their problems, but just being someone who will sit there and listen to them vent, and they'll feel better after they get a lot of what's building up in them off of their chests. That usually just being there to listen to them helps a lot.
Don't you find that's the hardest thing, though, to listen and not want to provide advice and guidance on next steps? I have a really hard time with that. I'm going to be honest, as a mother of 4, as you know, just it's innate in me to say, okay, next steps, let's, you know. So it's really good to hear that it's really in the best interest of the individual who's struggling to not jump in and take over and kind of guide them immediately on what they should do, and to just listen, like you said, Saul. It's so important.
Yeah, and Tina, what you're saying too, though, is so important to know oneself and what you bring into a relationship. And I think in therapy, that's something we are educated all the way through, knowing and trying to investigate. And I think, so yeah, if this person reminds you of your little brother, or if this person is like one of your children, or if this person feels like your sibling, that there's those things are evoked. And, or maybe I had the same experience when I was a student. And so I totally know how this feels, and this is what I did. And so this might work for you. And then we realized that backfired, and that's not at all. It looked like the same thing because of our own, what we project, what we kind of thought this evoked in us. But so those are very important pieces, is just to know yourself well enough. And maybe that, that's a learning process. You don't instantly go into that, but you can start to talk with your supervisors about it, or with one another, and realize, oh, that's why I jumped in the way I did, because this person reminded me of my sister. And, that's where that went wrong. And sometimes those things actually can help you. I'm not saying that that's wrong all the time, but sometimes that can help you realize, okay, yeah, this is that situation. And so now I know a little bit about the resources that might help this person.
So this is wonderful. And Donna, I do believe you sent the PowerPoint over to us.
I did not do that, but I will do that.
That would be wonderful. And then afterwards, I will share with the group, of course, the recording, and then the resources too, which would be great, because it's nice to know, to look back on the suggestions for conversation starters and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I did have a question about, I did see someone ask about drop-in hours, and we're not having them now physically because counselors are working remotely, and wellness center is really reserved only for, at this point, COVID testing, or routine medical appointments, that kind of thing. And everything is by appointment only. So what happens though is if a student needs our services, you just call the 508-531-1331 number. And we, sometimes you can speak, most times you can speak to a counselor the same day. Certainly if it's urgent, we do a bit of kind of fact finding, and then set you up with a counselor for a phone call. And then we're doing telehealth. So we're doing video sessions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Donna and Kathy. I'm sorry, right? Yes. No. Karen.
Jill.
Jill, I'm so sorry. I'm looking at your little name there on your.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I'm getting mixed up. I'm so sorry, Jill. But thank you so much for joining us. This was really informative, quick, but really informative.
Yeah.
I got little tidbits immediately, and I just thank you. And then sometimes that's all it takes to just sort of reset us on the right track to supporting our students. So we really appreciate you joining us.
Sure. And anytime you want something more, we can dive more deeply into a topic, and just let me know. It's a pleasure to have been here this morning. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thanks
you
for
both.
having us.
All right.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up, we're thrilled to welcome Renee, and I want to say, because I took 4 years of French, Bernier, but I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it.
I never say the Bernier, it's Bernier is fine.
Bernier, okay. And she is our coordinator of academic coaching and research services here at Bridgewater. And like Christina said, we really took the feedback that you gave us in the survey, and on at the higher end, of course, was supporting students' mental health. And that's why we, of course, had our representatives from our wellness center. And also really high up there was tools for supporting students' growth toward independence, like time management, organization, and communication. And we so want our ed coaches and our students to utilize services provided through Bridgewater when they're able. And our academic coaching is one of the services that traditionally our students haven't really connected with as much. And so we're really excited to hear, because I know that they do offer wonderful strategies and such to have a student, take more charge of their own independence as a student. So we'd love to welcome Renee. And Renee, I do need to make you a co-host.
Sure.
So thank you so much. I'll turn it right over to Renee.
Sure, thanks. So I am going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation for you with slides that kind of go through, again, like what our program is, what the skills are that we help students to develop over their 4 years at Bridgewater, no matter where they are in those 4 years, if they've stayed with us consistently, if they're just joining us for a short time. And then at the end, Christina, if I don't remember, please poke me to go through the appointment making process. It's very short and easy, but I do want to do that for you all to help you, to show you how you might guide a student through making that same kind of appointment. So without further ado, let's see if I can do this seamlessly this morning. Can you all see those slides? Okay, great. Are you seeing them in PowerPoint or?
Seeing it just not from the current slide.
Can you see the slides on the left though?
Yes.
Okay, hang on one second. I have to take my dual monitor off. Good deal?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, so title slide, we've already gone through that. Academic coaching at Bridgewater State. My name is Renee. I coordinate the program, and I'm going to get into the details of what that actually looks like. We run out of the Academic Achievement Center. Currently, we're all virtual, but when we're in the physical space, we're in the ground floor of the library across from IT. So at Bridgewater, academic coaching is available, oh my goodness, you'd think I've never done this before. There we go. To all BSU undergraduate students, it's one of many academic support services offered by the Academic Achievement Center. So the AAC houses first year advising, learning assistance, testing, and student accessibility services. As you can see, our coaches are graduate students. They're in a BSU grad program, and they're working with those undergraduates in the development of academic support skills, which are listed here. And we'll get into each one of these briefly so that you can see a little bit of how those conversations might go in a coaching session. And then my last bullet should pop up. Regular weekly or bi-weekly meetings are encouraged. So students can meet for 30 or 60 minutes, depending on their schedule accommodates, on what their availability is like. And it's all built on this idea of mutual respect between the coach and the student. The student is the driver of those conversations, but the coach helps provide them then with strategies and techniques depending on what they're bringing in as a need to that appointment. So some of the things that they might be bringing in, we'll see in a few slides, but it is first important to know, because this is sometimes a catching point for students too. Tutoring and coaching are different things. Tutoring is a more familiar term. I'm sorry about this. It's been a rough morning, and now my PowerPoint is like proving my point. So coaching is basically working with students on how to learn and how to be effective in the classroom, while tutoring is what you're learning is the challenge. The content is the issue. And so you're going to meet with an individual tutor who's an undergraduate peer tutor to work on content specific issues. Whereas coaching for us is that grad student led how to learn process. So these are the coaches that I have on staff, just so that you start getting familiar with faces. In the scheduling system, some of them have their faces next to their name, which is really helpful. And these are the skills that we're going to look at this morning. You can see there's 10 of them nicely laid out. They don't all nicely come out in conversation. Students don't always have good language for what it is they're seeking support on or assistance with. But this is kind of the gist of what we work on. Anything from active learning to organization to time management to test prep and all those things that you see in between. And we might focus on multiple of those in one coaching conversation. It's not like you have to say, I only want to work on my mindset, or I only want to work on setting goals. Typically that overlaps with something else in a conversation, or that may be a student's primary focus. And then out of the discussion, it's, oh, so it sounds like those are challenges for you. Let's work on that. So when it comes to active learning strategies, these are some of the things that we'll connect with a student on. These are derived from Sandra McGuire, who is Director Emerita of the Academic Success Center at Louisiana State University. She has a faculty background in the sciences, particularly chemistry, but over the course of her career has spent a lot of time and energy researching the metacognitive skills that help students to be successful, right? So how can students start thinking about their own learning process and about what works and doesn't work for them so that they can be successful? So these are some of the strategies that she will focus on, which is how do you actively read appropriately? Can you teach someone the material, right? As opposed to just study for an exam to get an A on something, which a lot of students, I think in that manner, right? Well, I just want to get the A, I want to pass the class. But really, if you were studying because someone told you you need to teach this material to someone else, you're probably going to put a little bit more thoughtfulness into that, right? You're starting to anticipate what someone might ask you questions about. You're starting to look for holes in your own knowledge so that when you're explaining something, those gaps close. So she talks a lot about that. The testing effect, right? So using quizzes and practice tests as a way to prepare and study for exams, working in study groups. Focused and diffuse thinking, expanding retrieval, those are often things we will talk with students about without using those terms. It's actually something you may have already spoken to your students about without knowing that that's what you were referring to, right? It's basically spacing out your study practice, giving yourself time off from that focused thinking, right? Like going for a run, hopping into the shower, and then all of a sudden something comes to you, right? That you've been stuck on over and over again. So encouraging those lesser thought about learning practices. So we focus on that. We focus on mindset. This is huge and often not something students know to ask for support on coming in. They may not be familiar with these concepts, but this is based on the work of Carol Dweck, who talks about learning as a constantly evolving, changing part of you, as opposed to this fixed thing that at a certain place in your life is never going to change or grow or evolve, right? So you can see here by the brain image, often students who have a growth mindset view challenge as an opportunity to learn, right? And they see others' success as something that they can learn from and be inspired by, right? They don't see themselves as not being capable of certain things. Whereas if you're in that fixed mindset, for example, I have never been good at math. It never came easy to me. I don't like it. I don't want to put energy into it. I'm never going to be better, right, than what I currently am with my skill set around math. Whereas someone with a growth mindset would see a never-ending opportunity to be more successful by getting a C on a test, right? Well, I can only improve from there. Or talking to their professor about why they maybe don't like math and how they can overcome that. So seeking out opportunities to constantly further yourself. So when we went online, I had a coach focus on kind of applying the mindsets to online learning, right? And so we have a lot of these graphics on our intranet page, which I will also show you how to access. And I can also send them along if they're of interest to you. You will have my contact information at the end. But these are kind of just quick snippets of what does it sound like to be in a fixed mindset, especially in the online environment, versus what does it look like to reframe that into a growth mindset. So a lot of what we'll do in a coaching session, and I will outright tell my students what I'm doing, if they give me something that sounds like fixed language, right? Like, well, I can't, or I never, or I don't. I will reframe that and I'll tell them, I'm going to reframe that for you, or I'm going to ask you if we can reframe that. Or if you were to talk about that in a different way, that wasn't so maybe negative or fixed or set, what would that sound like? And I will challenge them to do that. And sometimes that's helpful. And you'll notice a pattern change over time. Sometimes it's just the language that you can hear that sets off that that's something that you might want to be working with a student. Carol Dweck also focuses a lot on the power of yet, right? So if you hear those statements of, well, I can't do this, or I've never done that, or I'm not good at that, ... yet, right? There's always that potential for something else, for something better or greater. Goal setting, we talk a lot about SMART goals. Oftentimes we'll see students who are on academic probation and they didn't necessarily start their semester with any kind of goals in mind, right? Whether that was a GPA goal or how they were going to communicate with their professors or how they're going to do in a particular class. So we talk about how to set a goal and then how to make it a little bit smarter, right? How to really specify what it is they want out of the semester. When it comes to organization and prioritization, that's a huge one as well, right? So how do I organize myself? And then how, once I know all of what I have to do I then prioritize the things that I need to get done, right? So I will often use the urgent and important matrix. What things on my list are important and what are urgent and where do they kind of come together? And what are the things that maybe fall in those other categories? They're not so important, they're not so urgent. They're my time sucks, right? Like it's easy for me to hop on social media and 4 hours later I'm down the rabbit hole, right? Saul, I can see you on my small screen and like that was a big nod. So that's real, right? Like, or the Netflix binge that's like, I'm just gonna watch one episode and then you're like 3 seasons deep. Danger, it's like the danger zone. So what are the things on your list that can go away? So this is a more relevant example for our BSU students, right? Those important and urgent things are the things that need to be done. And perhaps they're the things that you left too long. And now you're pressing up against a deadline. Quadrant 2 is where we want to live. We want students to live in that these are important things, but I'm taking care of them and they're not urgent because I'm constantly taking care of them. I'm making deadlines for myself. I'm setting up appointments. I'm breaking up a large paper into smaller chunks. I'm taking care of myself by establishing a routine for fitness and wellness that I lay out every day. I do something for myself. So we want students to live in that arena, and we'll often talk about decision-making in this context. Professional communication, huge skill that in high school, right? It's very easy to stay after class and talk to a professor. There's less email, there's less non-face-to-face communication happening, maybe outside of the pandemic world now, maybe at an earlier stage, people are getting used to this. But we're encouraging students always to check their email multiple times a day. We talk to them about what an office hour is so that they know how to use it and how to prioritize it, because often that's not a thing that maybe if they're coming into their first year, they're super familiar with, especially virtually, because professors will offer office hours in different ways, shapes, forms in person, also online. And then we'll talk about sending professional emails, right? So this is just an example of something I use in a workshop that I'll do in an online presentation where I'll give students like a crap email, right? That's like, emergency, we need to meet, like, when are you available? And then I tell them the context for what that situation is, which is not an emergency, and have them rewrite the email, right? So how do you make that a better email? How do you implement things like an appropriate subject line, a greeting and a sign off? What's the information you need to include, the meat of that email that's going to evoke a response from your faculty member, as opposed to someone who's going to say, well, there's no information here, so I'm not going to respond, which might very well happen. So we talk a lot about that, a lot about building professional relationships with your faculty members, and then why that might benefit you in the future. Your goal ultimately probably is to move from your education into a career at some point. And maybe it's a string of jobs, maybe it's something you start in and spend your whole life in, but ultimately these kinds of communication skills are so valuable outside of the classroom as well and outside of the academic context. So, fun story here. Research and library resource support is a skill that we're constantly, and by we I mean me, constantly trying to figure out how to market and how to train the coaches on. Formerly, when I started 4 years ago, my title was Coordinator of Academic Coaching and Research Services. I can't tell you that I've really done anything with that. And I can't tell you that I felt that truly represented what we were responsible for as coaches, because we have an awesome library. They're right upstairs from us when we're in person. And our librarians are also research consultants. And so often I will train the coaches to an extent on research support. And then I will kind of talk with them about when they would be asking students and encouraging them to make a consultation, which you can do, as you can see on our library website, because that is not our full-time job. That's not our primary job. But I will walk students through and train the coaches on walking students through the library's website, because there's so much information on there. How to cite sources, how to create that research consultation, as you can see here. So I'll walk them through the steps of that. And also how to briefly use databases and find material from other libraries through interlibrary loan and talk to them about what that is, right? Like, part of that is respecting the role of the librarians. Like, I'm not trying to do their job. My coaches aren't trying to do their job, but also being knowledgeable so that students can have a base level before they maybe dive into a deeper conversation on that is the balance that we try and strike. So we can support students to an extent, and then at some point we're going to say you should meet with this person for more information. So that's the background there. What's this slide? My stress management slide, right? Yep. So as I'm sure part of what you were maybe just discussing with Donna was mental health, right? They're awesome. We often make a lot of referrals, warm handoffs. We have discussions about the counseling center and the wellness center and the resources that are available there. But being mindful, right, with our students about like what's on their plate. How many courses are they taking in a semester? What kind of jobs are they working, or internship hours are they fulfilling, or practicum experiences are they responsible for? Do they have observation hours because they're teachers? And I mean, I've had students who were doing those observation hours virtually, right? They were watching lots of videos. They were looking at classrooms, pre-filmed classrooms. So looking at what's on your plate and being mindful of all those things, and trying to strike that balance, as the image shows, right? Of like having a full mind versus being really mindful about what you need and what kind of supports you need to take advantage of and what you need to do to take care of yourself over the course of the semester. And some strategies around that. I have a coach who loves like breathing exercises. He's actually in one of the psychology programs and doing some internship hours at the counseling center. So he often will use a lot of his tools from that work area to implement into his coaching practice, which is really helpful. And then we go over study cycles. So both this study cycle that you're seeing on this slide, which is adapted again from LSU out of Sandra McGuire's work, and this Pomodoro technique, focus on breaking up your studying into smaller chunks, right? Based on the time that you have available every day over the course of the week, which can really, I think, for students, try and get them out of that cram mentality and out of that, well, I'm just going to spend the next 4 hours doing whatever I can do. And then 1 hour in, they're on their phone, or they're watching a show, or they're online shopping, or whatever that looks like. So these two techniques really encourage you, more so this part, focus study sessions on the study cycle, to set yourself a goal at the start of your practice for studying. Kind of like yoga, that's the language for yoga, right? Like set an intention for your practice. So set an intention for your studying. Do that one thing uninterrupted for whatever your duration of focus is, right? So if you're working with a student who's like 30 to 50 minutes, no way, but 15 to 20 is more reasonable, great. Have them break up their study time into 15 to 20 minute blocks with very specific tasks that they want to focus on in those blocks. And ideally, those tasks are smaller chunks of larger assignments, right? If they're not homework assignments or problem sets, they might be papers or studying for exams. So really thinking and being intentional about what it is you're spending your time on and how much time you can really spend focusing. I know I'm doing a lot of talking, and there will be a time for questions at the end. I'm almost done, I promise. So test prep, we often talk about the before, during, and after, right? So using the levels of learning from basic understanding and knowledge to, see the balloons over here, some of those higher levels of thinking to help predict test questions. And then after that exam, how are you analyzing how you did? What items did you miss on that test? And what were some of those reasons, right? Was it related to test anxiety, where you were literally facing a mental block, you started panicking and having a physical reaction? Or did you realize, oh, I completely didn't study that chunk of material, right? And so that was less of a physical response, more of a preparation. Not every coach, and I truly don't use this all the time, and it's easier in person when you have someone to bring in a test and you can sit with the test and the analysis and really go through it. We find that online, a lot of students don't get their tests back, right? Or even really have access to them after the fact. So this is a template. You can certainly use these kinds of prompts and questions to talk to students about analyzing their test performance. But we go through really the before, during, and after of what were you doing to prepare yourself, be that creating a routine for studying, all the way up to in the moment, and then after analyzing how that exam went for you. So the impact we've seen so far is really positive. For fall 2020, the students who met with us, yikes, I'm sorry, everybody, it's been a rough morning. 93% said that they would come back for academic coaching in a future semester, which is awesome. And then 93% also said they would recommend it to a peer. So we've seen a lot of success, and you can see here, this is one of my favorites, that students are, before they're coming into coaching, they're not necessarily saying that they're confident in their ability to be successful, or that they have strategies that they're excited to utilize in the classroom, right? Or that they had a growth mindset. But you can see that jump after coaching. So this is some of the testimonial stuff that I know. I have sent this along to Tina, and she can forward along to you in this presentation. I really love this one up here. I felt more comfortable moving to an online format because my coach really helped get me through this semester. And then this academic coaching was the thing that helped me pull out of probation last semester and continued on to stay in good standing. So those are the things that we really love to hear. A lot of the feedback I'm really proud is reflective of the coaches and how they're making students feel in those appointments, right? Like, I had a warm and compassionate coach. She was very encouraging over the course of the semester. We stayed motivated with weekly meetings. You know, they were very understanding. So for me as a supervisor, that's nice to hear, but also students won't come back if that's not the case, right? Like, if they are off put by someone's personality, someone's ability to stay calm, if there's a technology glitch, all of that can really deter someone from feeling confident in a service. So I'm really pleased that this has been some of our qualitative feedback. How it works is this. A first meeting is very information gathering, right? So there is a first meeting form that the student is sent once they make an appointment. It's a 2-question form. How'd you hear about us? What do you want to focus on? Nice and quick, because they won't fill it out if it's long, right? I don't fill things out if they're long. I get like kind of off put by that too. So we know where they're at. And it's some initial action planning. So like, where are you at? What do you want to focus on? What leads you to say that? What's your semester look like? And how can we set some goals? And then any follow-up meetings are maintenance meetings, right? You're tracking progress, you're following up, you're sharing strategies. Maybe you're refining the goals that you set. I will often ask my students, I ask them to give me a rundown. Now it's gonna go ahead of me. So I'm probably gonna have to hit my back button. Hang tight for me. I'll have them give me a rundown of their entire semester. What classes are you in? What do you know about your professors? How do you feel about things? Asynchronous, synchronous. Let's look through the syllabus. What do you like? The syllabus is huge, folks. Holy moly. Oh, that syllabus. So we spent a lot of time on that in the first meeting. And then I will ask them, what is a realistic goal? And what is your ideal goal? We'll start with ideal, right? Like, what's your pie in the sky vision for doing well in this class? Well, obviously I'd like to get an A. I'd even like to get an A-. Okay, what's your realistic goal? Well, knowing my challenges this semester, knowing my schedule, let's shoot for a B+, and I'll be thrilled if I get an A-. Fantastic. And we track that progress over the course of the semester. So we're really asking them to think about, you know, what is real for them, not to discount the fact that they could achieve their ideal goal, but to ask them to kind of be a little bit more serious about their reality that particular semester, so that when things shake out the way they shake out, they're not surprised. They're not surprised, they're not upset. They've been kind of prepped for expectations. So Again, not to discount anyone's ability, but to kind of give a reality check, which some students need more than others. Some are really right on target with that and they know what they're capable of, and others are like, well, I can do it all. And they've also got 8 million things on their plate. So we try and have that come to Jesus moment. Final meeting is a recap of the semester, right? How did it go? Progress, challenges. What's your feedback? What do you want coaching to look like for you in a future semester, if at all? The GAs will often use that to share a brief survey with their students. That one's less brief than our feedback or our first meeting form. They'll share that they're going to be on break, but that they'll be back at the start of the next semester, and that if a student needs intercession support, I'm available for them. But that's really the recap, right? Is to kind of summarize how that semester went and how they might even approach a future semester. The middle meetings, students can meet for as many meetings as they want. The caveat is I typically try and keep it to 1 meeting a week. We have a few students, and more so now that we've been online, where we do make exceptions because they're really in need of support. And so we try and be cognizant of that. But mostly we're looking for 1 30-minute meeting or 1 60-minute a week. Where we have made those adjustments, we'll tend to say, would it be helpful for a student to have 2 30-minute meetings a week, 1 on a Monday, 1 on a Friday, right? Or if they're having those 2 30-minute meetings a week, but they're crunched for time, would it be helpful to move that to 1 60-minute where they have more time on one day? So we try and be really aware of scheduling and what will work best for the student, while also kind of pushing them to become independent and do some of this work on their own, right? That's why I love those follow-up meetings and more than 1 meeting, is because I can say to a student, I want you to try these things this week and then report back next week. Or next week, we're going to work on this planner based on all the things you told me this week, because we had a really great meeting, but I got a lot of information from you. Next week, let's apply it to this tool, right? So encouraging students to kind of come back and follow up for accountability, for motivation, that kind of thing. This is that process, and I know I'm close on time. 30, 60 minutes on academia. Students get a confirmation email when they make their appointment, which is great. I get a confirmation email and I immediately put it on my Outlook calendar. And then 2 hours in advance of their session, they will get a reminder email. So if they have an 8 a.m. session, they'll get a reminder at 6 a.m. If they have a 10 a.m., it'll come at 8, et cetera, et cetera. And in that reminder is the Zoom link that takes them to the coach's personal Zoom room. Okay, so we are meeting in Zoom. They can also cancel or reschedule those appointments in that same email. So I think it's under the link to go to their room, there's a cancellation or a reschedule link. We love when students do that as opposed to no show on us, because then we're not just kind of like waiting in our rooms for 15 minutes. So this is just a quick show of our intranet page where you can see this blue button is where students can open Academia, though we have it linked literally everywhere. And wherever you can open Academia, you can get access to a coaching appointment. There are other things that you can make appointments for, but that blue button takes you to the home landing page. And then down here under student resources, this is on, like I said, our coaching intranet page. You can see it has our old name on it. I think I gotta adjust that. I'm slowly trying to transition it to just academic coaching, like subtly so that no one notices until it's a thing. And then down here is where you'll see the student resources, which is huge. That's where I have links to all these individual skills and then resources like weekly planners, semesters at a glance, printouts. We're working on getting things fillable. It's not always the way we have it, but often if you're meeting in a one-on-one session, the coaches have like the Word doc version of something and they will share that with a student or make that accessible to them. So my quick takeaways, this program is all about academic skill development, right? It's not tutoring, it's not advising, it's not counseling, whether that's career or mental health, though you better believe we get those questions and we get students to where they need to go when those questions arise and we can't answer them. And the relationship is collaborative, right? It's coach and student working together with the full recognition that the student is the expert in themselves. So the coach brings strategies to the table and they may have some insight into like, you know what's working for you and what's not working for you, but I'm going to say maybe like based on my experience, these things have never worked for me. So let's talk about that, right? There are grad students. They do have a little bit more educational experience, but we do try and let the student drive as much as possible. So this is my name. This is my email. That's the best way to reach me right now. We are online and I'm always on my email when I'm on. So that's for you all. I know that was a lot of me talking and a lot of information, and I know I'm right at time, but I do want to show you academia if that's okay, Tina. Okay. So let me share my screen once more.
Yeah, thank you, Renee.
No problem. Oh, let me exit out of this. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. I have so many links up and this is really getting me. Sorry, folks. You see all my tabs. Okay, let's just go. Oh, there it is. Okay. So how I got to this page, because that was a lot of clicking around on unnecessary things. bridgew.academia.net. You literally type that in. It will take you to a home page. Your students might have to sign in if it's the first time accessing it. They'll just put in their BSU credentials. And they can make appointments in a couple of ways. This is obviously one of my students that's coming in next week. They can go to quick new appointment. This is the home page. Nope. Or, oh, there's another way they can make it. And I'm not sure if I'm not seeing it because it's, oh, if they have an upcoming appointment, it's going to show up here and they can make a new appointment by clicking this button that says new appointment. But we'll go to new appointment in the quick button. And you can see, I'm going to type in one of my coaches' names. This is Sundar. He's one of my coaches. So I click on him. He's the student. So your student would be clicking on their own name. And then they would go down here and they would click on academic coaching under tutoring and academic coaching, right? Those two things make up learning assistance. They don't want to click on this guy. This is for our probation students. We just added this in. They don't need to be confused by that. They just want this. So if they click on coaching, they're going to click on it again. It's listed as a course or activity for any student, right? So any undergraduate is going to have a list of their classes, and then it's going to have academic coaching at the very top. Luckily for us, it's at the top because it's alphabetical. It would, if it got lost, we might suffer from that, but it will show up at the top. They would click on that, and then all their availability is going to show up. So you can see I have availability this week. They can change the week by going over here. It says showing next week. And then the following week is when the coaches actually come back onto staff. We have 7 of them on staff this semester. And you can see I input the schedules that I have, and these are all the availabilities that are available. If they are already working with a coach that they like, they can search for them here, right? And if they were like, nope, I need an hour, I know I need an hour, great, change it right up at top to an hour. Go to make your appointment, and you have to hit that confirm button. That's what triggers that email to come to you and to the coach. Through this page, you can also type a note in. You can say, hey, I really want to focus on this. You can have an opportunity to say that in your first meeting form, but coaches wouldn't, students wouldn't necessarily know they're going to get that form. So if it would be helpful for them to put a note in, they can. And they can also set up a reoccurrence. And they're like, oh, I want to meet weekly every Wednesday on this time, blah, blah, blah. Now that might look confusing. A coach can set up a reoccurrence with a student, especially after that first meeting. I like to end my meetings by saying, so when are we meeting again? And kind of creating the expectation that we're meeting again, not do you want to meet again? So when are we meeting again? And then they're like, oh, I guess we're meeting again. And so we meet again. And so at that point, I might go in and set up a reoccurrence because we've decided maybe we want to meet weekly or every other week. So once you hit confirm, you're good to go. And that appointment is going to show up on their upcoming appointments on their home landing page. And that is a lot of talking that I'm going to finish right now.
Renee, thank you so much. You covered so much great information. I mean, I'm blown away at all of the areas that can be focused on in these individualized meetings. It's terrific because I know all the ed coaches are thinking, as you were presenting, specifically about certain areas that each of the students that they support could really benefit from going through some of these strategies and the takeaways. I mean, right away, that urgent versus important matrix. I loved that. That would be a great tool that the students could see in action in a meeting, and then maybe the ed coaches could kind of take it away and kind of work with the student to keep utilizing things like that. So I think it's terrific. I want to open it up. We will maybe like 2 or 3 minutes for a couple of questions and a little bit of discussion.
Can I ask how many GAs there are for this program?
So we have 7 on staff this semester. We had 8 last semester. For funding purposes, we're back down to 7. 6 of them are 20-hour-a-week graduate students, and 1 of them is a 10-hour per week graduate student. The primary responsibility is these one-on-one meetings with students. Sometimes they will have supplemental projects or responsibilities as well.
Cool. Yeah, I know that when I was a tutor in my undergrad, we worked with the academic coaches a lot.
Yeah.
We were like partners, and that was really helpful because sometimes a student would come in and they wouldn't really be prepared for like an appointment for tutoring. I was like, why don't we work with academic coaching too? And then they would be like really prepared. It was awesome. So
Awesome.
you guys do really good work. I already know this. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so I'm gonna hire Emmett next. I'm gonna steal him from steal them from.
No, you don't. Oh, no, you don't.
We like to be partners with tutoring as much as we can too, because we often will also get students who come in with content concerns, right? Or they want this semester, a lot of students wanted help with writing. And so we would often reverse that and say, we can't write your papers for you, nor can we really help you to the extent that the writing consultants can. So let's hook you up with an appointment there.
Renee, can you just explain how, so as I explained to you, our education coaches would be coming to the meetings with the students to provide support as needed, and then kind of supplement afterwards and continue on with that great work. How would it work if the student made the appointment through academia and got the link? Would they just need to forward it then to their ed coach so that they could join as well? Would that be the best?
You know what? That's a great question. And I can test that with my boss, but in my imagination, that's how it works. Because it's a personal meeting room for the coaches who are using the Zoom meeting room, there's a waiting room, but there's no password necessarily.
Okay.
So as soon as the coach would see that the student is in their waiting room, they would admit them. And technically, if there's a student coming in after, for an appointment after, and they're early, they would show up in the waiting room as well. If the coach wanted to, they could let them in, but obviously they wouldn't do that. So in my best guess, it would be that the ed coach would show up in the waiting room as well, and they would just admit both. It might be really helpful to have ed coach next to your name in your Zoom profile, so that when it shows up in the corner of the box, the coach knows that's Lauren, she's an ed coach, as opposed to, do I have a student after and her name is Lauren? And they don't let Lauren in ever, right? So that might be helpful, but I also have a whole slide prepared for them this semester on one of their like spring 21 things to know is about the Excel program.
Oh, great.
So that they know who you are, they know who those students are, they know what your relationship looks like. So that way they can expect that both of you will be in that meeting together.
Terrific, Renee. Thank you.
It would be helpful for you all to say that if the student doesn't disclose that right off the bat, like, oh, I'm so-and-so, and this is Saul, my ed coach, like, or this is Saul, we work together in the Excel program. If they start just launching in, full permission to say, P.S., this is who I am, because that would help the coaches a lot.
Absolutely.
They're not like, and you, sir, who are you?
No, that's great. That's good advice. Thank you. And I like the note to put your ed coach next to your name. That's just another little helpful piece. That's great.
Cool.
Something I have to add too is the student I work with and I went to a writing tutor appointment, and something that I noticed was that, like you had said, whoever gets there first is the one who gets admitted, and then the other person kind of gets dumped into the waiting room. But because of that link, when I went in, it listed me as my student's name. So then I just had to kind of be like, oh, I'm not the student, like the student's in the waiting room. But I don't know if there's, at least I haven't figured out a way to change it when I click that link to be my name instead of his name.
That's awesome news for me to hear, so that I at least know that and can say that to the coaches, because I don't know how to fix that either. But thank you, Marissa, because now I can at least know to expect that or see that or explain that to the coaches. It should be easy enough. I know that the person who is in the room can communicate with whoever is in the waiting room via the chat. Marissa, does it work that you can do that from the waiting room? Can you chat with someone in the?
I haven't tried to do that yet. Usually what's happened is we both click the link at the same time, and both times I've gotten into the room first. So instead of doing a chat out to the waiting room, I've just said, oh, I'm the ed coach, he's in the waiting room, and then they'll admit him, and then we'll have the conversation.
I guess you could always encourage your student to be the first to click the link. But if they're not, I would say exactly what Marissa's doing is really helpful. Just saying, hey, I'm not actually who you need to meet with, but this is who I am, and they're in the waiting room. Perfect. That works. I think it's a good workaround.
Since there is that space for notes when the students are making the appointments, it might be worthwhile to have them put in that they'd be attending with an ed coach.
That would be a great place to do that. Wasn't even thinking about that.
Great suggestion, Saul. I saw that too. I noticed that. That's a good idea. Yes, and so that's where the ed coaches can come in as they're working with their students to set up an appointment. Hey guys, let's put this into the notes just so everybody understands who.
That's a great idea. And after that first meeting, they're going to know faces. They're going to know faces and names. But that first meeting can be a really good place to insert that note or verbalize what Marissa's talking about. But I love that. I'm really trying to get students to use the note feature more. And you can, if you notice, there's a little attachment button as well. Academia now has a new feature where you can attach something to that note, which we don't typically use. I could see that being more helpful for a tutoring session, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility for a student to work on something that a coach has given them. And if they want to attach it, they can. But they could also share their screen in a session and that kind of thing, which is a helpful thing for them to know how to do for class anyway. So we can also talk around some of the basic, how do you use Zoom? Like, we're not Zoom experts, but like the basics, right? And kind of Zoom etiquette.
Renee, we could talk to you all day. I'm sure we have a million little itty bitty questions, but I will pass along your presentation to everyone. We know where to find you. You are wonderful. This was so informative and helpful. Really appreciate it. And we'll be in touch, I know, as we have things come up, but we're really going to be encouraging our ed coaches and students, to utilize this wonderful resource, and try it and see what happens, maybe you get a few tidbits of strategies that are helpful. And I think that's so important. So.
Well, thank you for having me. Tina, I'm going to send you an updated PowerPoint so that our 8th coach, unfortunately, her picture won't be on there. So I'll send that along.
Okay.
Yes. And some of those slides I updated briefly. So thanks, everybody. It was really nice to meet all of you. And hopefully we will see some of you this semester.
Thank you, Renee.
Cool. Thank you. That was good. Thank you.
Well, wonderful, everyone. So, gosh, look at how fast the time goes. We're going to the last 2 areas that you had voted upon that were super important that you wanted to focus on talking about were how and when to fade support using real life examples. And that was tied with what do the levels of support look like in a virtual environment. So we're going to move right into the how and when to fade support portion. And our own Zach Chipman is going to cover this portion, and then we'll move into another section after that.
Hi, everybody. So we're going to just go through a scenario that I believe we've all been kind of looking at, and we probably all at different stages working with our students. But one of the big things is providing support and then encouraging independence. So when to jump in and when to kind of be more reserved. And we feel the key that's on the next slide that we'll be reviewing in a second before we go through the steps is really helpful to provide that support, what that support looks like in different types of scenarios. So we'll be jumping into breakout groups after this PowerPoint and to discuss different scenarios and different strategies that maybe you have used or you've thought of using, and just troubleshooting and going through those. So this scenario or this example is sending meeting invitations for student and coach check-ins meetings. So just checking in before class, after class, or when working on action activities from career and coordinator meetings. I know that's something that was kind of ramping up more and more throughout the semester. But can everybody see my page? Is that good? I just don't want to block it.
Yes, looks great, Zach.
Awesome. So starting out hands-on, ed coach provides complete support. You guys have all seen this many times. Ed coach verbal, ed coach provides a good amount of support, gesture, good. Ed coach provides average amount, monitor, minimal, and independent, no support. So, and that's our goal in all areas of the Excel program. So in this instance, when scheduling a meeting with a student in a virtual world, because that throws a wrench into everything. As we've done in the past years, we've sat right next to the students, so we've been able to kind of easily gesture and point to the screen. But in this world, it's more about sharing screens. Ed coaches sharing their screens to do examples of modeling. I feel like that's one of the big ways of modeling now is to share your screen and go through the steps, then stop sharing and have the students share their screen, and then they'll go kind of through those same steps, kind of trial run or things of that sort. But review, like scheduling Ed coach check-in meetings, reviewing both schedules, each person sharing the screen, seeing when everybody's available. For the first week or so, the Ed coach will, once a time is decided, the Ed coach will send the meeting invite, but sharing the screen so that the student can see the process of how to create a Zoom meeting or a Microsoft Team meeting or Google Meets. Really, whichever platform works for you. I feel like everybody's using something a little bit different. But I feel like one of the biggest parts is sharing the screen so that the students can see the visuals of going through the steps. I know during career meetings, that's been really helpful when working with students showing me how they get into different things. And honestly, sometimes you learn new steps and new strategies to find different things on a website or through different programs. I know I've learned a lot about Outlook through students showing me different ways to navigate the program, which is awesome. And then verbal gesture. And the reason why verbal gesture is kind of together virtually, it's really hard sometimes to say, oh, top, right, oh, move the mouse left, right, north, east, south. Yeah, it can be a little confusing. So I feel like the verbal, but with the gesture of using your mouse has been really helpful when working with students on, let's say, the resumes, trying to figure out what line we're looking to edit or maybe make adjustments to. But back to this example of scheduling an Ed coach check-in meeting, students will start to identify when is a good time to meet, looking at both student Ed coach schedules. Maybe the student will ask, oh, what time is a really good time? And answering a question with a question saying, oh, well, let's take a look at the schedule. When are we both available? When is it a good time for both of us to meet? And then putting it back on the students for them to problem solve, figure out on their own. But they're starting to take more and more ownership, as we know. While the student shares their screen, the Ed coach shows and tells the student how to navigate the meeting invitation. Maybe it's something where it's changing each week, or maybe it's something where you can have it in a set schedule to have it on repeat. But going through those steps and maybe going back to phase one of modeling if needed. Student starts to take over the identifying the meeting times and scheduling them more and more. And that's in the phase three, the gesture. I feel like in this virtual world, unless we're able to meet physically in person, the mouse is the way we gesture. Unless it's something with time management, we can point out our watch or something like that, or maybe I see something, and unless you have other gestures that you've worked with your students that have really worked. So at this phase, the Ed coach stops sending the meeting invitation. It's discussed. I know some Ed coaches will schedule a Ed coach check-in meeting on a Friday for the following week with their students. And from that meeting on Monday, it's something where it's an expectation that the student starts at this point taking over. The Ed coach will give reminders through text or email to just help the student along. As in the virtual world, we're not right there with the student. We're not going from one activity to the next. It's something where we're putting more ownership on the students, but it's also something where sometimes a little text reminder, something like, oh, I thought we were going to meet today at some point, but I don't see a meeting invite. And something along those lines is like, oh yeah. And then maybe the student, we need to go back to another phase to go through the process, or the student just sends an invitation just like that and starts taking over. Phase four, monitor. And this is one of the big ones that it's from going from gesture to monitor. The Ed coach anticipates the student's going to start taking over, but we need to make sure that we're close by to send that text, to have that reminder. it's a natural learning experience for the student to maybe forget. We've all done it. Heck, I know I've done it, and it's something where it's okay to quote unquote fail and learn from that. But it's great that you're there as that support to be monitoring. Like, hey, like, oh no, we have that test we have to study for, but how are we supposed to study together if there's no invitation or something along those lines? Oh no, we got to get that done. It's something that can be really helpful. I know some students are starting to put reminders in their phone or putting alarms on their phone. That's something that I think I live by. I don't know if I'd be able to survive without my little alarms being set off all the time. But this is something where we continue in this phase for a little bit of time. Some students will need to be monitored for extended amount of time. I know for students in the past, just thinking about our student head coach agreement forms, maybe it's a full semester of monitor, just need those little reminders, but it's something where the student is able at times to take over independently and then fully phase into the final phase, independence. The students taking over, and it's like, it's second nature. And I think that's one of the most exciting parts is the head coach, kind of nice that you're totally hands off and there's that expectation. And this is something where the students have the confidence to start scheduling meetings with classmates, maybe different things with their peer mentor. I know something that if I wasn't sure how to schedule a meeting, I wouldn't be so forthcoming to interacting with my peers, trying to schedule cook-offs or Netflix. I know a lot of students are watching shows at the same time. I'd be a little bit more reserved to do something like that if I didn't know how to do it. But when we have that self-confidence, we know how to do it. Oh yeah, I'll send a Zoom meeting. That's no problem. Absolutely. Oh, invite Ryan and Bob too. Let's go. We definitely have to watch Cobra Kai, so this is something that I think it's a really great opportunity. You start to phase yourself out. And as we know, we want to start phasing ourselves out right from the beginning, but it's important to go through the steps of the process. And sometimes it can be tough when a student's like, oh, will you send it? It's like, well, this is your college experience. And this is something where you need to take ownership of your schedule. I already had my college or my school experience. So this is yours. This is where you need to start carrying the torch. And it's something that is, that empowerment of that ownership is so vital for so many students. I did want to just take a pause. Does anybody have any questions, or does anybody have any examples of kind of these type of situations on going through that process of starting to fade the support virtually?
I have a little bit of one.
Yeah, absolutely.
The student that I'm working with at Bridgewater State is someone who is just starting his post-secondary time. He, in the past, has gotten very used to having ed coaches, paras, teachers prompt him specifically on what he's supposed to be doing at any given time. Over the course of the previous semester, he and I sat down, made a schedule of the time that he and I are together, of what he wants to do at a given time. And slowly over the course of the semester, it got to the point where he was actually keeping track of how long we were working on different things and would start to prompt me with, okay, this is what time it is. We have 5 minutes until I'm supposed to be meeting with someone. Why don't we stop now and get ready for the meeting? So it's just the progress over the course of the semester. Once they have this set schedule, they start to realize that it's their own responsibility to keep track of things. And as it went on, they got better at it, definitely.
Absolutely. And then I have to say, starting to phase yourself out at the very beginning can be really helpful to the student, not having that expectation like, oh, that's my head coach's job. They're going to remind me. When that's started to be put on the student, they're taking that ownership. And they start reminding you like, oh yeah, don't we have this? Absolutely do. Let's take out the books. Let's take a look at that. And that's so empowering for a student because they really have that leadership role. And that's where we're kind of starting, we want to kind of pass that torch to them because as we've all said, this is their experience, their ride, their show. So it's so important for them to start taking over all components of it. And I'm just looking at time now. I know, does anybody have any other questions before we jump up?
Got another 5 minutes for discussion. This is really good to think about the different, I love that, Zach. I love that going through the specific example and how each step sort of looks. You know, I guess I'm thinking in terms of right now it's virtual, of course, and that's what we're talking about. Does anybody else talk about, if anybody wants to share other examples of how did, like for gesture, for example, I feel like that might be a tough one in a virtual world. What are some things or a couple of pointers or strategies you've done with your students to sort of gesture if you're in a meeting or you're sort of, you know, have you come up with anything that works?
Well, I think as Zach had pointed out earlier, when you're doing stuff over Zoom, a lot of time there's that crossover between gesture and verbal prompt, because there were times where it was like referring to a specific icon on a screen or a specific corner of the screen and things like that. And honestly, I think that's roughly the equivalent of if we were in person, I'd be reaching out and pointing at the thing in the corner of the screen. So the two start to get equivalent when you're dealing with something like this.
I find using directionals helps. It's that left, it's that right, like you're going to the upper left, the upper right. That is so helpful because my student, he's a visual thinker, but I'm not. So even just helping like me to do that is really helpful so I can like connect with him in the way that he needs to be connected with. I also want to ask, is this PowerPoint going to be available to us? Because this is really helpful.
Yes, we will send all the PowerPoints.
All of them, just every single PowerPoint.
All the PowerPoints and the recording. So it'll be a great resource. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So something that I've noticed with my student is that trying to express facial, like a little bit more animate my facial expressions and or adding like kind of hand gestures where I know she can see my hands kind of helps liven things up a little bit, I guess. So it makes it more of a in-person experience, even though it's not. And so just trying to be a little bit more dynamic, even though you're sitting down in front of a computer screen, you know, it's really hard to kind of get that like kind of in-person energy that you would try to keep up. But if you really like kind of put the work in to try to like move around a little bit and get things a little bit more live, you can kind of get, I don't know if it's necessarily a gestural support, but it's something that you can change as far as your own gestures to liven things up.
I have to say another piece that I really enjoyed using with students is a student will be sharing their screen. I'm going to use the resume example because I feel like that's somewhere where gesture worked often. I take remote control of their screen, so I'd be able to control the mouse, but as soon as I went hands off, I'd still quote unquote have control. The student can still use the mouse on their end, so I'm able to maybe just highlight a word or highlight an area and say, oh, there's something right in here that isn't meshing well, and that's that verbal / gesture. And other times I've said, I'm just going to highlight something. I'd like you to just look at it and just let them take a gander. I'd be like, oh yeah, I need to switch this out or that. But it was a really kind of fun way of interacting and working together remotely. It's using technology to our advantage, and it's typically just 2 clicks of a button. I know some of the Chromebooks can be a little finicky with the remote control of the other user's computer, but I found it to be really helpful. Has anybody used that remote control option working with their students? Nice, awesome.
I have, but also you could also try to use annotations. You ever done annotations before on Zoom?
No.
When you're sharing a screen, in the same kind of thing that you do to take over their screen, you can you can just use annotations, and that allows you to draw stuff on their screen that they can see. And so you could potentially, like, if you want to like circle a part of the screen or something like that.
All right, I'm about to go YouTube this immediately after here. That's awesome.
These are great.
That's on
ideas.
Zoom?
That's on Zoom, yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's in that,
Very
like, the top little bar that pops up whenever someone's sharing their screen. There's like that green section. You click down that, and I think it's just annotations right there.
We're learning Zoom hacks.
Yeah.
Look at us go.
This is awesome. I feel like that's a great way to, that's like a new way of gesturing certain things when working with students. And I think almost getting your own, it's not your own lingo, but your own gestures that work for certain students. That's something that we worked on with a lot of different student ed coach teams at job sites. Sometimes, oh, let's ask the question again, or point in time, it's time to wrap up, or let's move on to the next step, or whatever it may be. But maybe just having that communication with your students, saying, oh, if I circle some of the highlights on that, that's me gesturing that I think we should take a look at this again. And kind of getting between you and your student, it's something where you have your gestures just to yourself, that is just your team. It can be really helpful because it's, I know some ed coaches have had students do gestures towards them when class, when they're like, I'm not sure what just happened. Like, can you make sure to take that down? Or I'm having technical difficulty, whatever it may be. But those are great things to get on the same page with your students, if that's something that works for that student, obviously, in those given situations.
Okay, so can you believe oh, I'm sorry, Christina.
No. I was just going to add a quick little note. So just about the levels of support. It's important to remember to, even with your one student that you're working with, just because one skill, they might be independent and maybe mastered in one area, doesn't mean in the next area that they're not going to need complete, maybe hands-on assistance. So, maybe with studying and organization, they're completely independent, but maybe with communication, they need hands-on verbal support. So just kind of try to go from that least to most support, try with like the least amount of support. But if you see that it's not happening, that they're not completing whatever task you gave them, try to increase the support from there. But just make sure you're following up. Don't, say, oh yeah, go email the professor about office hours and then assume they did it, because that might be the area of communication that they need a lot of extra hand-holding in. So I guess just that follow-up is the point I wanted to note. Just make sure they're actually following through. And that's where that student evaluation tool can come in handy, because obviously you guys rate, but you'll know like which areas they need more support in.
That's a great note, Christina. Thank you. And I think, and we've seen, and I've seen on your student eval tool data, that there are times where, you're providing more, then you're providing less, and then you have to go back to more. That's okay. That's just how that's how it looks, and not to feel like, oh gosh, well, we're not progressing as a team, or the student's not progressing. It just means that those are their needs at the time. And so that's that fine line of just, being there to provide the appropriate amount of support. And so it's great. And we could talk about this for another 2 hours, but we've got a half hour left. We want to jump into our final segment. And this is going to be kind of fun. This is something new that we're going to do, breakout rooms. We're so excited about this. So you had voted that you wanted to talk real life examples and about, providing support in a virtual environment. So we're going to divide everybody up into 4 breakout rooms. And it'll seamlessly get you right into the room. I'm just doing it automatically. It'll throw us all into a room. Each of the 4 of us, Zach, myself, Christina, Lisa, are going to be the moderator in the room. We'll pull up the scenario, the real life scenario. And of the group that you're in, you'll have to elect someone to be your reporter. So we'll be kind of taking some notes, but the reporter will want to take their own notes as to what people are saying that they would do in this situation to provide support. Okay, so let me try. This is the first time I'm doing this. We have practiced. We're going to break up into 4 rooms. And did we assume, we did assume, this is true, right? As co-hosts, we're all going to end up in a different room.
Hopefully, we'll
Yeah,
see.
I guess really.
We'll see how it goes.
We're gonna see how it goes. You guys will go to your rooms. I will manually move us each to a room if I need to. And Lisa, I gotta remember that the two Lisas have to be in the same room. Okay.
Yes, we do.
All right, guys, we'll see you in a minute. And we're gonna roughly spend 10-ish minutes in discussion and then come back to report out. Okay, bye. We're not going by yet because I have to move people. Okay, so let me just see. Okay.
It was easy when we practiced it.
It really was.
Well, that's because we only had a few people.
True, true.
Bear with me, guys. I'm almost there. Not quite as easy as we thought, but I think we got it. Okay, so I'm going to be going to, okay, I'm opening the rooms now.
Right.
Oh no. So Tina just texted that her power went out. Gotta love it.
Terrible timing.
In the middle of a training. Don't you love it? Hold on 1 second. So Kaylin, are you there, or Kathy?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so Tina lost power. I don't know if you heard me say that, but she is trying to get back in. Are you able to bring everyone back to the main room?
You as the host would have that ability since you're now the host.
Oh, I'm the host?
Yes,
Oh,
it
God.
looks like you've become the host now.
It's a lot of pressure. All right, let me see. Close all rooms. Okay, so it says they're gonna close in 55 seconds. Okay. All right, so it looks like everyone is starting to come back. Sorry, guys, we had a little mishap. Tina lost power, who was in charge of all the breakout rooms. So looks like we're getting everyone back together now. So we have a few more minutes, so kind of just to check back in. So group one, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, so would anyone like to volunteer to go first? I know we don't have too much time, but to kind of discuss their scenario.
I can.
All right, thank you, Saul. So what was the scenario, first of all?
That the student had been working on a group writing project and was instructed by a professor to set up an appointment with the writing lab to review what they had done.
Perfect. And what did you guys come up with as far as steps that you might take?
We'd start off by asking the student if they thought they were capable of doing it. And if it sounded like they could do it independently, then we'd let them take care of itself, making sure to check afterwards, either by checking in with the student specifically or possibly by checking on their Outlook calendar to make sure that it was actually completed independently. Given if they were uncomfortable with it, we'd give them some basic instructions, ask them to be sharing their screen as they were going through things, and watch as they were trying to navigate the website to the proper links. Spending what time we could watching what they were doing, observing if they were going in the correct direction. If necessary, offer them some thoughts of, well, what specifically do you think you should be looking for? Trying to be as minimally invasive as possible, just slowly escalating. Well, maybe you should be looking on this side of the screen. You're looking for this sort of button, to, if it becomes absolutely necessary, taking over and showing them specifically by their cursor what it is that they're supposed to be doing. Once it actually gets to the point where they're expected to fill out the forms, choose the proper schedule, and things of that nature, we'll definitely try and enforce to them to be as independent as possible. Any information that they want to put in themselves, we'll offer to double check afterwards before they submit it to make sure that it's appropriate and what's supposed to be given. Trying as much as possible to reinforce that we want them to be independent and to be able to do this themselves. Not just this time, but in case this is something that needs to be done later, that they try and remember what it is that they're doing so that they can come back to it with less prompting afterwards.
Awesome. Thank you, Saul.
Hi, everybody. Christine, I'm sorry. I'm
No
on
worries.
my Chromebook. This never happens. My power literally went out for like, I don't know, 5 seconds, and completely kicked me out of our group. And I did hear, you guys had great levels of support. I absolutely love that. One note I would make is that as an education coach, I would highly, we really want to see the ed coaches attending that first meeting with their students, regardless of their independence, because we want the ed coaches to sort of see the process. We want them to sort of understand what will be going on in the sessions. We want them to have a baseline, so that if the student is ready to fly after that first one, that's okay. We also want the tutors and the academic coaches to understand that the student, is a student in a specialized program that does have an education coach supporting them, just so that there's that awareness. I think that's important. So that would just be my one little tidbit of add into that whole scenario. But I loved all the other levels they were so well thought out.
All right, who wants to go next? I'll just, since I know who was my spokesperson, I'll call on them. Tara, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Do you mind going next?
Yeah, not at all.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, so for our specific scenario, our students failed one of their exams and they were really bummed about it. So what we were talking about is looking for the why and why they failed that particular exam. So, was it study skills? Did they, not plan for the exam? Were they not organized? Contacting the professor afterwards about it, utilizing office hours, the academic achievement center services such as tutoring and coaching, and then for next time, discussing how we can be better prepared and organized for the next exam, whether that's developing a study plan or a to-do list, and going forward from there.
Yeah, thank you, Tara. And as far as the process, we had talked about obviously doing it with the students. So like Saul mentioned earlier, whether it's sharing your screen, but kind of looking up the resources together, emailing, doing that least to most support, like Saul said, maybe put it on the student at first, but make sure we follow up, make sure they actually did it. And if not, okay, let's share our screen, let's do it together, model how you might write the email, things like that. So anything, Marissa, that I missed, or anyone else that was in the group? I think we
I
covered.
think that was a good summary. Yeah, sorry, I completely missed those points. Yeah, that's very important.
No worries. We're a team here.
Yeah, it's group effort.
Yes. All right. So there were 2 more groups. Does anyone want to volunteer to go?
I can go. Yeah. So I was group, I think 3. We had a reviewing career videos and filling out a journal, where the journal either had some sections that were blank or some sections that had 1-word answers. And we kind of recognized that there could be multiple reasons why this would be. We had a couple solutions. One would be working on quality over quantity. So a lot of the students, when they get more used to the career journals, they'll want to kind of just push through a bunch of them, and having them go back and read aloud their answers to you, and talking to them about the jobs in particular can get them to kind of fill in more in-depth answers, or get them kind of thinking about it again, and they might be able to write even more about the jobs themselves in the journals. And then asking questions about each individual question. So breaking that question down, figuring out what the sections are, and then trying to kind of have a specific standard to write for each box. So someone mentioned that was 3 full sentences would be a great idea, is just kind of a basic standard for each box, is just, filling out, and that kind of consistency could help. Also, if the student is just struggling with the finding the answers or reading and or anything else, doing strategies like sharing the reading, having your student read some and then having you read some, and then trying to work through the questions together and kind of break down and trying to make them work for it still, but try to kind of use guiding questions to give them a better chance of finding the answer and helping them so that these things can take a lot of time, but if you help using guiding questions, that can make it a little bit quicker, and obviously scheduling more time as well is a big one too. But overall, it was just mainly asking questions about the questions, I think, was the consensus of like the biggest way you could help.
Guiding questions, and we always say asking the question, so putting the question back on the student. So if they ask you a question, kind of putting it back on them, like, oh, that's a really good question. Where do you think we can look? Just so they kind of have to have that thought process rather than relying on you or whoever to give them the answer, because that's what we want. We want them to have those skills to kind of think things through. But yeah, awesome, Paul. Zach, I'm sorry, Sean, Paul. Zach, I know you were in on that. That was your scenario. Anything you want to add?
Sean just crushed that. He just, everything I had put down. And I think it's a good example of some of those guiding questions is just putting the student in a leadership role. Like, all right, you're the boss. Are you going to hire this person who's going to be on time, going to be at least 5 to 10 minutes early for work, or the person who comes in a little bit late, doesn't have their work completed, and putting it on the student, because the students typically will be coming away with, no, I want the person who's showing up early. Like, all right, well, that's who you want to mirror those actions. That's the type of employee you want to try and be. So that would be important for this position. Let's make sure we add that. So just those type of examples, but like Christina said, answer a question with a question, thinking through it together. Really great strategies. And Sean, great job summarizing. That was awesome.
Awesome, thank you. And Paul, I think you were the last, your group was the last group?
Right. Our student is involved in a group project and just received an email from his professor telling him or her that the other group members have let the professor know that our student has not kept up with their end of the project. So obviously we were not as ed coaches involved in that group initially. So we discussed getting ourselves involved in that right away with our student, having our student set up a group meeting that we can participate in. And we have to find out exactly what the project is and then what our students' role with that project is. So we discussed setting up a timeline for our student to work on the project, staying involved with the student in that way. We have to get the student back on track, and the only way we can do that is by getting involved with the group in a meeting and find out exactly what the project is, because we don't know at this point. So that's it. Any suggestions?
I wasn't sure if Tina, were you in on this one?
I was in on it.
Or did your power go out?
I was in on it until power went out. But no, I think Alan could pop in, Joe could pop in. There were a few other pieces that were really good as far as, I know, Alan, you were talking about sort of just meeting with the student themselves, just with ed coach and student, and having the student, give the information to the ed coach about, what their role is in the project and letting them sort of summarize it to the ed coach. Alan, did you
right? It shouldn't take more than the initial meeting shouldn't take more than 2 or 3 minutes to have the student just go over the overall assignment, what is expected, and then have them break down what their participation in the group is, and if you have the time, what the other students' participation in the group is expected to be, and see what the student is saying and what the email you're getting from the professor is not lining up, and how to make up that ground.
There was definitely also talk of supporting the student in communicating back to the professor. I think, Lauren, you were talking about that, you know, sharing, you want to chime in with what you were saying, like how you might go through that process with the student?
Yeah, I think once you guys are on you and your student are on the same page about the project, responding to the professor's email would be like a good starting point. And obviously the student would respond to the professor, but if they needed support in like wording the email or like figuring out like the main ideas you want to get across in the email, they could maybe share their screen while they're writing it. And if they need that support, like it would probably make sense to have that be part of the meeting Alan's talking about, just getting things started and then hopefully getting them with their group. So you could kind of help rein that in and reframe so that they're on the right page.
And then I think too, Tyler and Joe, you were saying to try to see if you can either be part of the next group meeting, you know, with your screen off, microphone muted, just so you could be observing what's going on in the group dynamic, so you can support your student moving forward with, you know, how to communicate, maybe some strategies for communicating with their group mates more effectively and things like that. Anybody else from that group want to add anything else?
I'm not part of that group, but I know that it's possible to have meetings recorded. So it might be worthwhile, even if you're not necessarily going to be attending the next meeting that the student is having, to make sure that they or one of the other people in the group are recording it so that you can always review it afterwards. Even if you're like actively reviewing it with the student, you can go over specific instances of, well, see, this is where they're saying what they're looking for. These are the sort of things where they're expecting you to do. Maybe you should like go back with pointers of, you should be maybe taking notes, writing some of this down, maybe even saving your own copy of the meeting so that you can go back and double check to make sure that you really understand and remember what your responsibilities are. Sorry, Tina, go ahead. Again, trying not necessarily to actively engage with yourself in the group unless it's absolutely necessary, because as soon as you put yourself into the group actively, that kind of changes the level of relationship that your student has with the other people in the group. So that's kind of like a fourth or a fifth thing instead of necessarily the first or the second thing to be going for.
I think you're right. It totally depends on the situation. Is your student taking the course for credit or for audit, right? In this situation, the student was taking the course for credit, and so the education coach was not part of that. But so the follow-up from that really was the communication piece. And so then that's where, you know, starting on the right track, and then I got booted off, was sort of communicating to the professor, but then supporting your student in communicating with their group mates and sort of summing up after they meet. Hi, everyone. I just want to make sure this is the part that I'm supposed to be working on. Is everybody in agreement? And so you're supporting your student and just advocating and communicating better. You're right, Saul. You know, in certain cases, it would not be appropriate. But maybe if the student is auditing a course and you're there as an education coach, it is very appropriate, depending on the level of support that's needed for that particular student. It's all a balancing act, knowing your student and knowing their needs. So gosh, we have gone over, haven't we, guys? But this has been really great discussion. I will be sending out the link for this recording. I don't know what happened when I got booted off, if it stopped the recording, but we'll find out. But I will send that out. I will send out the PowerPoints. And of course, we'll be meeting in our check-in meetings and everything, and we can continue these conversations. We'll send out a little survey after this to see what was helpful, what you might even want more discussion about, and perhaps reach out and see if you would like little additional professional developments. Maybe we do an hour or something in the spring here or there, you know, to continue on certain pieces of discussion, because I think it's really helpful to have you all discussing together strategies that you're utilizing. So I want to thank everybody so much for joining. I think our staff will stay on for another 5-10 minutes. If there's any individual questions, you're welcome to stay and hang out, but you are free to go. We really appreciate you attending. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Well, this was very helpful. Thank you.
Kaylin, were you able to connect with that ed coach?
I reached out to them and they said they were having technical issues. I asked them if they needed any assistance and he said he would let me know. And that was right before you had lost power and the host position went to Christina. So
okay.
I do want to let you know you are still recording if you want to stop the recording.
Thank you. That's a great. Do you want to stop the collaboration?